Good afternoon, good morning. Just want to welcome you all to this session on states and scale, and so terrific to be here with Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Grove, and Chancellor Greenstein. I want to jump right into the efforts that you're taking to respond at scale to some conditions in our country that are really challenging and in many ways have likely created significant disruptions to your work. Want to start with Commissioner Grove. Your agency is responsible for employment and economic development in the state of Minnesota. You're really at the epicenter of some of the national turmoil. Can't imagine the challenges you're facing. Can you give us a snapshot of the context there in Minnesota and how it's impacting your efforts to get Minnesotans back to work?
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everybody. And thank you to Maria and the team at JFF for having us here today. It's an honor to be a part of this important conversation. You put it well, Michael. This has changed everything. It's hard to overstate that. Not only did the pandemic completely transform our approach to the growth of Minnesota's economy, but the killing of George Floyd and the aftermath that followed, over 500 Minnesota businesses destroyed in Minneapolis and St. Paul, has only further raised the stakes for growing our economy and doing it in a way that is equitable. And I think, as our governor has said, we've really been battling two viruses in our state. One is, of course, COVID-19, and the other is about 400 years old. It's the systematic racism that our society faces. And, I think Minnesota is a state that is a proud state, a state that ranks so highly on so many measures of quality of life and education and workforce and civic duty and voter participation. But there has always been a challenge in this state as it relates to disparities. The income gaps between whites and people of color are some of the worst in the country. Same goes for education gaps, home ownership gaps. And while it's a state that is not only the land of 10,000 lakes, but also the land of 10,000 nonprofits, and we have, a lot of organizations that are engaging in solutions, we have not really turned a corner on these issues in our state. And so I think it'd be an understatement to say that the killing of George Floyd has been a wake-up call for our state. You've seen it play out not only, of course, in Minnesota, but across the country. And for our governor and for our Department of Employment and Economic Development, it has been that wake-up call too. And I think when I say wake-up call, we came into this opportunity to lead state government knowing that equity was going to be a major issue and a major area of focus. The governor had campaigned on that. But it's clear, I think, now that if we aren't trying drastically different things, we're not going to see different results. And I think it's kind of the definition of just business as usual. If you're talking about it, making some tweaks, moving along, but you're not doing big things, you're just not going to see big change. And our citizens demand big change. They deserve big change. And that's really the task we've given ourselves now as we move into this next phase of our response. So, I think we haven't figured it all out. We're doing a lot. We're doing some of the basic stuff first, things like disaster declarations. We've freed up some money from our general fund for some loan funds that we are targeting at communities of color. We have made equity and inclusion a goal of every single program in our department, so that it's not just kind of one special team that's doing it, but everybody has metrics that they're striving to meet as it relates to equity, so that it's everyone's job. And of course, we're safely reopening our economy, as so many states are, in the right and thoughtful way, keeping in mind the safety of workers in the businesses that are reopening, many of which are predominantly staffed by people of color. Think restaurants, think bars, personal care services, what have you, to ensure that that we keep those workers safe. For example, in our state, 6% of the population is Black, but about 20% of the coronavirus cases are Black individuals. So you see that play out across the country. And I think it's just a time not only for reflection, but for action. And I think like so many states, we're engaging in response, but I think the urgency has just cranked up a lot in the last few weeks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Let's go to Louisiana. Commissioner Reed, can you set the scene for us for Louisiana and help us understand how the dual crisis is impacting your work there to develop the state's talent base? I know this is very personal for you, native of Lake Charles, and no stranger to kind of big challenges. We all know about the implications of the Hurricane Katrina. Can you share there?
Sure. So thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. JFF partners, we're grateful. I would say ditto to Steve's comments. The work is more important than ever. The challenge is even greater than ever. Last year, we set a goal to more than double the number of credentials in our state, in a state, Louisiana, where 1 in 5 people are in poverty. So we had an audacious goal already, and we knew that erasing equity gaps was at the center of our work. We put that stake in the ground last year. So now, as we're thinking about this work, we're still committed to talent development. We are still looking at the affordability issues, the access issues, the value proposition conversations. But then along comes COVID. And so now we are recognizing that we have citizens who may not have the financial resource to get the credential that allows them to get out of poverty. So the cycle of challenge, of misery, of engagement has got to be stronger because the crisis is even more real for us than ever before. On top of that, we have to answer the question, can we safely educate in our state? So how do we make sure that we have a safety lens on top of an access and talent development lens, on top of an equity lens to move our work forward? So we are at the ready, engaged in this work. We have a special session going right now at the same time. And so we're trying to make the case that now is not the time to back away from talent development. Now is the time to double down on talent development and erasing equity gaps in Louisiana.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Reed. We want to now go to Pennsylvania. Chancellor Greenstein, you doing a lot of system redesign work. Can you describe the context in Pennsylvania and how these events have impacted the work that you're trying to do there on the ground?
Yeah, no, happy to. And thanks, Michael. Good to see you, and others. Great to see you. Thanks to JFF for hosting this important discussion. So, Pennsylvania, the state system is the public state system in Pennsylvania. Obviously, historically, has served a really important workforce development and social mobility set of roles as elsewhere, providing affordable access to all Pennsylvanians to the education they need to, live sustaining careers, contribute back to their society, et cetera. Pennsylvania has not been a generous funder of higher education historically. The current administration has really begun to change that over the last several years, and we're grateful for that. But I think we're 48th in the nation in terms of our investments in higher education, and that has, in a state facing demographic challenges that has led to precipitous enrollment declines, 20% overall since 2010. Which is introduced, which has led to tuition increases, which make it harder to get enrollments, which exacerbates the cycle. So we have been on a path prior to the pandemic to fundamentally redesign the system. It's really two thrusts. One was financial stabilization. We have several universities which are at or near or approaching some very serious financial challenges. We were on a 5-year path to stabilize ourselves financially, ensuring that all of our universities were able to operate sustainably. But at the same time, to re-engineer our education so that it met the needs of today and tomorrow, serving adults who need more in the way of upskilling and reskilling, so they can maintain their relevance in the labor market. Focusing on multiple modalities of delivery, ensuring that we could reach into rural as well as urban populations across the state. We were doing some typical things, shared services to introduce efficiencies, for example. We were doing some atypical things, including thinking about the academic program across the state. What does the state need, and where should it be hosted? And we were driving very aggressively, as I said, to ensuring all of our universities were on a 5-year kind of path to being operating in a balanced budget way. Obviously, the pandemic has significantly impacted that work. The challenges have, we'll know in the fall. I think there's a lot of ambiguity with respect to enrollments and housing occupancy and all that stuff, but obviously we'll know soon. We're planning for some further under significant deterioration. We have moved a 5-year journey up to a 2-year journey. All I can say is I am really glad we had a 2-year hop on this, because, I would not want to be starting now as we would be trying to respond to the kind of challenges that we are facing. So, we have a head of steam. It is going to be a marathon sprint, I think, if that's possible. But the mission of public higher education is probably more important now than ever, given the economy that we're going to go into. So I think that the choice to not do and we can't fail. I say that I'm sure for all of us.
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor. I want to kind of switch gears to kind of solutions and kind of get a little bit more specific about some of the strategies that you are attempting on the ground. Commissioner Grove, you were a longtime Google executive, kind of strong business perspective. I understand that you really care a lot about people developing digital and technology skills, that are really important for this moment and for the future of work. And you are especially interested in people of color acquiring those skills. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in that area and what you think that that's going to do for these populations that are struggling in the economy?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think, like all of us who are tasked with creating good jobs in our states, we want to create the jobs that are going to be around for a while and that are going to pay a lot. And increasingly, those jobs require skills in technology, whether they're a traditional job in a technology company or a technology job in any company. Those are the jobs that we want to grow in our state. And so we have done a lot to try to grow our startup ecosystem with a program called Launch Minnesota that focuses on really early stage startups and giving them the supports that they need. We brought back our angel tax credit, which will help increase that startup ecosystem. But more broadly, any incentive dollar that we spend as a state, we want to make sure we go first to a company that's what you might call the innovation sector. And, based on a series of analytics that we've run, we've looked at which kind of companies qualify as such. And that really means they're using technology to increase their output in a really unique way. And so we take, for example, something like the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership that partners, community colleges with companies that are in need of training to give them funding if they're working in technology to train more workers and train them more quickly. That program does focus on equity as a core principle. In our state, anyway, 70% of the labor force growth over the next 10 years are going to be people of color. And so that's just a major focus for us in any training program that we have. We're also looking at, our basic kind of investment dollars that go into enticing companies to come and making sure that we focus on the companies for which they're going to be in high innovation sectors and grow the economy a lot faster than the other sectors that are there. And so it's not just sort of an individual standalone effort like the Angel Tax Credit Program or Launch Minnesota or these kind of, technology attraction programs, but it's also trying to look at all the criteria that we have to spend our incentive dollars is targeted at businesses in the innovation sector. And then our training then is available to people from all backgrounds to make sure that there's a pathway into those jobs once they arrive, so that you have that talent ecosystem ready and waiting.
Thank you so much. I want to I got to speed us up here. We don't have a ton of time, but I want to Commissioner Reed, you have approached kind of the challenge of scale from multiple systems. You were the commissioner in Colorado and now there in Louisiana. Can you talk about kind of what you believe to be kind of the highest leverage kind of actions that you could be taking? You were talking about, the importance of, talent development, but that includes short-term, long-term. What are some of the highest leverage actions that you believe you can take right now?
Clearly, when you think about a resilient Louisiana, this is a design challenge problem, right? It's not a siloed approach of just education or education to employment. It's a question of how well are we serving every citizen, and how are we thinking about a people-centered, resource leverage, data-informed approach that allows every entity, every agency, every community and faith-based organization to be focused on making sure that every Louisiana citizen is resilient. So that means we have to understand where we are and not be satisfied. We have to have a clear plan of where we want to go that allows everyone to have a credential of value and every household to be resilient. So that means they're technology informed, they have credentials, they have resources, And then how do we make sure that we're measuring what matters so that we know that we're getting there and that we can mid-course correct if we're not?
Thank you so much. I'm noticing as both commissioners began to kind of talk about kind of some of the work that they're working on, we haven't heard anything about like specific programs or specific sectors. We talked about kind of digital and technology skills, and that is interesting. And it brings me to the question I have for you, Chancellor Greenstein. You know, you also come to this work multiple perspectives. You here in the U.S. Post-secondary, UK, your time at the Gates Foundation. A lot of times when we think about scale, we think about models, and we think about programs, we think about sectors. You think about scale, and you include culture in that. Can you talk a little bit about culture and why that's important to scale and some of the work that you're trying to do?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So, you know, in order to not just survive into the future, but to thrive and to sort of serve our historic mission, we're going to have to really focus on changing so much of what we do, right? We're going to have to think about how to engage differently with a changing student, continuously changing student body, to develop cultural competencies, new pedagogies, you know, thinking differently about, you know, credentialing in terms of non-degree and stackable credentialing, improving student pathways by integrating. I mean, there's almost no aspect of what we do that isn't going to somehow have to change in order for us to serve our historic mission, right? The good news is that there's a good deal of field knowledge about the solutions that achieve some of those objectives, about what to do. The problem is that the solutions, however well known, however good the evidence-based, they're just hard to adopt by organizations that are divided. And if you do culture surveys, you know, and try to get a sense of the cultural cohesion within higher education, it is low compared to other industries. You know, it is hard to implement change solutions if people in an organization where people are basically fighting with each other. You know, and higher education is you know, given the pressures that we're under, we see the usual things: faculty, administration. We see universities competing with each other. You know, we see board members of our system, you know, in certain contexts competing with their councils of trustees, which surround our universities. So the questions we have to address is, how do we prepare the ground organizationally, culturally, so that we are prepared to integrate the solutions that, you know, we see as working? And this just got a lot harder. You know, the politicization of everything from, you know, wearing a mask to the events surrounding, you know, George Floyd's horrible and tragic death. Is making our community even that much more divided. And somehow we're going to have to figure out how to realign around our mission to again pull towards the future in the similar direction in order that we can affect the changes that we know we need to make.
Thank you so much. In our last waning minutes here, do you see anything that you believe changes kind of the way that we invest in our post-secondary education and training systems? You know, the resource issue is such a challenge. Any thoughts there about investment?
Well, clearly it'll have to be focused on the end goal. I think Dan is right. Like, what are we going to rally around? Are we going to rally around talent development? Are we going to say that social determinants of health means more people are educated, right? So whether you see this as a moral imperative or an economic one, more people need access to education and training. So the idea that we're going to have some system redesign, cultural redesign, means that we get out of our siloed approach when it comes to programs, when it comes to people, when it comes to funding, and think about how do we leverage all of this in a tapestry that allows more people to be resilient, more people to move from poverty to prosperity, and more of us to have the ability to really lean into opportunity, real opportunity. And I think that's our responsibility. This is our moment for educators to educate, to drive change, and to commit to making sure that everyone is prospering.
Commissioner Grove, last word: role of business in public investment in support of our post-secondary education and training system.
Critical. You know, I think for too long we've had workforce systems that, given the reliance on government to do training, train workers and send them out into the market to find that role. And if you're not partnering with business all the way along the path, you're not creating the right kind of training to get people ready for those jobs. So we find the most effective programs by far we have are those that are partnered with business, not only from an investment standpoint, but just even from a design standpoint in terms of the training itself. So critical piece of this. And I think every state is realizing that as we reimagine workforce for this century, getting business really at the heart of it is so critical.
Thank you so much. Really want to thank you, Commissioner Reed, Commissioner Grove, and Chancellor Greenstein. It's really terrific to have you at Horizons today. Best wishes in all the excellent work that you're trying to do to get people back to work in your respective states. We will turn it back over to our MC here at Horizons. Thanks again.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Michael.